Generally, I'm not one to read manga. Just, I don't know, I don't usually have the motivation for it. A while ago, a few years ago, I got like into fan comics, but even then, like the only manga I had read to completion was Soul Eater, and I don't even remember what happened in that. I kind of want to reread it. I started a couple that either didn't get finished or I never finished them. Like I started Claymore and never finished it. There were the two that were never finished that I started were what were they called? One was called Iron Knight, and the other was called Remonster. Actually, Iron Knight never got finished. Remonster, I don't know if that got finished or not. It might have. I have no idea. Or maybe it's still ongoing. Again, I never caught up with it, so who knows? Besides Soul Eater, the first manga for me to finish was Chainsaw Man, and I'm sure by now everyone's heard of Chainsaw Man. You know, I've started Berserk, but I'm going through it I'm still reading it, but I'm going through it kind of slower, just kind of as the mood strikes me because A, I know it's not finished. B, I don't know how it's gonna continue now that Miura's dead and like his staff is continuing it without him. So I guess we'll see how that turns out, but I'm gonna keep going through it just slower. I'm not gonna be like keeping up with every new release, probably because that's going to be way too long in between. But I did decide to read Toriko. Now, a few years back, with my best friend and my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, we decided to watch it. We kind of like got together every weekend to just watch anime for a little while. And that was one we just kind of were like, I don't know, let's give this one a try. We're out of stuff to watch, so it all kind of started with JoJo, but then we were just like, whatever. So we gave Toriko a try, and at first, I don't think anyone was really into it, but then I continued a little further on my own, and then was like, all right, guys, we got to continue this. So we did, and not so much just because of the show itself, but I think because of the experience of watching it together, we all got way into it and really liked it. And then that was it for a while. Just didn't think about it. My one friend continued the manga and was like, wow, it gets really good. And then he finished it when it got finished and told me a little about it, but I never really thought much about it. And then recently, my wife and I were like, we should watch Toriko again. That was a fun time. Let's do it again. I mean, the one friend's not going to be here for it, but that's fine. We'll just continue it on our own because we need stuff to watch because all the shows that we have on our on the back burner are not finished or something, or she has to rewatch season 1 because she doesn't remember anything that happened, because literally she can watch a show and like 2 days later be like, I don't remember anything that happened in that show, and I'll be like, we just finished it. Like literally one time I saw her watch a show and then she went, I liked that, I'm gonna watch it again. And she literally watched it back to back. I anyway I digress. We decided to watch it again because we didn't have much else going on, and it was a good time. Not as fun as it was remembered, just because it wasn't that first experience, but we liked it. The anime's got some problems, like the animation is not even just the animation. It's just like the drawing, I guess, the shape of the characters in some frames are just weird and off. The animation's kind of like not absolutely terrible, but not fantastic. Just kind of very middle of the road for when it came out in like 2011. Just that, and they have like weird segments at the end that are just kind of thrown in there. Apparently the dub only goes up to like, I don't remember exactly, but it's something like episode 50 or something, which is like a third of the show. And then the sub continues from there. I kind of get that because a lot of the like food-based puns they probably wouldn't translate very well. And that would get more and more difficult as the show goes on. But yeah, this time we just, like the first time we watched dub and then switched over to sub when the dub stopped. But yeah, this time we just watched the sub because that's easier. And a lot of the jokes were explained, which obviously makes them funnier. But yeah, so anyway, so we watched that and finished it, and it was all well and good. My favorite part of the anime, as opposed to the manga, was, and they kind of do it in the manga, but it doesn't have the same effect, is in the anime, every episode at the beginning, in the manga, every episode at the beginning has this narrator, I guess, and he'll do a little bit where he says, someone once said there was, and then he'll just list off this really ridiculous, like, gourmet food concept, because the story is all about food. He'll be like, someone once said, and then he'll like go into it, and then he'll say, this is the gourmet age where people are seeking out new tastes. And he just, it's funny because like at first it's like whatever, and then you get a ways into the show, and then just the longer it goes, the more intense he gets about it. Like he's just hamming it up, and it's my favorite. So if you're going to watch the anime, absolutely look out for that. The only disappointing part about that is at some point the food ideas became almost entirely fan created. I think in the manga they do that a lot too. A lot of fan concepts that he just throws in there. But the ones in the show, at some point they just kind of drop in quality and they're less creative. At least that's how it felt. Maybe I'm off base here. Maybe I'm just crazy, but it felt like at some point in the anime that just kind of drops. But the narrator at the beginning, oh my god, I love it. I love that guy. I hope he gets plenty of work. But then once the anime was finished, I started reading the manga. I haven't described what it's about yet, so if someone hasn't watched this yet, they'll have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay, the story of Toriko. The world is in the gourmet age, which basically means there are tons and tons of giant monsters, weird creatures that you can, cook and eat in like the weirdest ways. There are white sand beaches, but instead of sand, they're made of rice. There is a fish that lives in oil, and if you fry it in that oil, it will be really delicious. And also, that oil never gets dirty, so you can reuse it indefinitely. Literally, in the first episode, there is a giant fish with lobster arms. I mean, it gets crazy. There's tons of weird, interesting foods that they get into and weird preparation for them. A big part of the show is special preparation ingredients, which is, well, here's an ingredient that you can cook, but in order to cook it and have it taste good or not like explode or whatever, you have to cook it in this certain way. And sometimes it's really difficult, and sometimes it takes just a lot to do. But that's, and then, so Toriko's the main character, and he's what's called a gourmet hunter, or in the Japanese, it's bishokuya. And so it's his job to go around and basically capture ingredients. So he'll go fight big monsters, he'll go into dangerous areas to find a plant or something. He does a lot of fighting. That's basically his part of the show. And then he's followed around by a chef named Komatsu. And you might think, well, if this is a shonen battle manga / anime, Toriko's going to be the focal point of the show and the chef isn't really going to matter. No, chefs are very important in this show. There are a couple chef battles. It's still a lot of like Toriko fighting, but Komatsu doesn't exactly play a back seat all the time. He still doesn't fight much, but it's like he's important to the show. Without him, there's not really a show. So it's kind of Toriko and Komatsu as the main characters, but more so Toriko because he does all the fighting. And it was a little disappointing that Komatsu can't get into any fighting at any point, especially at one point in the manga. But as far as I remember my one friend telling me when he was reading through the manga, it kind of felt like it was a little bit rushed at the end. Not too bad. Like it still felt like the story had a satisfying conclusion, but it felt like there were some big story beats that were just missed. But anyway, so yeah, basically the whole show is about Toriko going out and finding ingredients and fighting people, Komatsu cooking it, and then because Toriko has something called gourmet cells, every time he eats something, he gets more powerful. And that's basically the gist of the power scaling in the show, is find something delicious, eat it, and then you get really strong. And you get to a point where there are people who have been gourmet hunters for a long time, and any one of them could most likely destroy the world if they tried hard enough. And, that's even considering that only a very small portion of the world is inhabited by humans. It's like imagine if the world that we live in had had 150% of the population, and no, not even that. Let's see, maybe 500% of the current population that we have in the world, five times our normal population with that landmass, and that maybe 5% of the world. Could be wrong on those numbers, or maybe 5% might be kind of accurate. That's 5% of the total landmass of the world with 5 times the current population in real life. It's, ooh boy. And then these people can destroy the world by punching it hard enough because they ate good food. And apparently if you go outside the normal human world, where all the biggest gourmet delights are, it gets incredibly more dangerous, and you get weird areas of gravity. The heat or cold or the amount of rain there is insane, which once they get to that point, it's kind of weird that they just kind of skip past a lot of that. But I guess there's a couple areas where they go way into that idea, but then there's a lot of times where it's what happened to that kind of stuff? Anyway, but yeah, that's even considering that a lot of stuff in the human world itself is very dangerous. Basically how the power scaling works kind of is through the entire show, things are given capture levels. These capture levels at first only go up to 100, and for I would say probably half the manga probably or more, the capture levels don't go above 100. And then you get to a point where you see some capture levels and it says immeasurable, and you go, what's that about? At one point, you could have speculated, oh, it's because the species is nearly extinct or something like that. But no, there are some capture levels that once you get far enough, they go into the thousands, which is, not super common, but it happens. And oh my God. So, it's kind of like a power level sort of deal, but it basically, early in the show, how they describe it is for each one capture level, so let's say something has a capture level of 1, it would take 10 armed soldiers to capture it under normal circumstances. There's plenty of things that have a capture level of less than 1, so it's these things would be no problem, but for a normal person to get. But there is stuff with let's say something has a capture level of 3, it would take 30 armed, fully armed trained soldiers to capture it. And that's the weak stuff in the show, or the manga or whatever. So it's wow, the power scaling goes crazy. Even considering that some of the really dangerous stuff really early on, you'd be why is there stuff way higher level of capture than this? That's just how the show goes, or the story, I guess. I keep wanting to switch off between saying the manga, the anime, the show, the story. Why do I have to do this to myself? It's so confusing. Anyway, there were a couple differences I noticed between the anime and the manga. Something very notable being the anime added at least one, potentially more, extra characters that never existed, even in addition to the one-off episodes that I'm pretty sure they added in. The biggest character that I know for sure was an add-in that never existed in the manga was Tina. And they keep trying to shoehorn her in to the anime and have her be relevant, but she's not. She doesn't do anything. Literally, her whole shtick is she has a catchphrase, and she is a reporter who wants to get a news story. And she can never get it because she'll do something stupid, like she'll leave the lens cap on, or she'll lose her camera, or it'll break, or she'll just get into the moment and forget to record. And it's just like, why are you here? There is no purpose to you being here. I hate this. Please go away. Like at first, it seems like she's going to be something, and then she's nothing. And then when you get over to the manga, like you notice that there's parts that they cut her out because she didn't need to be there. So it's like, okay. Another thing I noticed about the anime is I think there's a large chunk of censorship when it comes to like blood, which is kind of unnecessary, especially when at some point in the show they go into like the criminal underground where there's narcotic ingredients and gambling, and it's like, why are you doing so much censorship? If you have, it was kind of like a less bad version of what 4Kids did to One Piece, where it's like, this is clearly a show that's going to go to these places, but you're insistent on making this more for children. I just like, come on. At any rate, Toriko's got this evil group to fight, which, let's see, what was their English name was I think Gourmet Food Corp, and then their Japanese name was the Bishokukai, which is not at all way too close to Bushokuya. But at any rate, they're basically in the background like doing evil things, trying to capture ingredients and not caring about whether they make them go extinct or whatever. And his basically rival through a lot of the show is Starjun. And Starjun's a great character. He's just kind of like Toriko, but better. They do have very different power systems, but... oh yeah, another thing about powers in this show. Assuming you have gourmet cells, you get special powers. And sometimes they'll have to do with food and cooking and utensils. And sometimes they won't. Like Toriko has a fork and knife attack. So he can basically do a chop with his hand and it will cut like a knife. Or he can like spread his fingers out and that's a fork. And it can, he can grab stuff, or at one point he can like shoot it out like a beam attack or whatever. And then he also has a kugi punch or spike punch in the English version. And it's basically he punches them once and it's the effect of punching them multiple times in the same spot in a row and like compounding on that damage, which has nothing to do with cooking. Speaking of, I'll get there. So Toriko is one of the 4 Heavenly Kings, which also includes Sani, whose main attack is he has hair, and he can use it for an attack called Frygeishi. In the English version, they call it a spatula. I don't know if a Frygeishi is close to a spatula. I don't know. But I always figured it was like a fry basket kind of. But what do I know? But yeah, he can basically layer them together and like weave them together and then like reflect stuff back at people, or he can pick stuff up with his hair. So it's like, okay, I can kind of excuse that. And then you have Coco, whose whole thing is poison. Now, poison is just something that, is harmful to the body, essentially. It's a substance that's harmful to the body that isn't a disease. Now, the way he uses poison makes no sense whatsoever. It's kind of like his poison can do whatever the plot needs him to do. And the only thing that relates to food in his arsenal is poison dressing. That's it. He's got poison swords. He's got poison armor. He's just got poison. Like, what else do I say? It's ridiculous. Oh, and also he's a fortune teller for no reason. I don't know why, but he is. And then the 4th one is Zebra, who doesn't show up until a ways into the story, but his whole thing is sound attacks. I really like his idea because I like the idea of sound attacks, but his go kind of weird. Like he uses echolocation. Okay, that's very useful. He has sound bazooka, which is like, okay, it shoots out a loud noise and that can hit people. Then he can make lightning and meteors and like, what does this have to do with sound? Like he's got some interesting ideas, and then some of them just go crazy. But yeah, there's other characters that use other stuff later in the show. Like there's one guy with a spoon attack, or there's one guy, his whole thing is that he's covered in frying oil. So yeah, just a whole bunch of stuff all over. And then each gourmet hunter has, and a lot of chefs actually, have what's called a life full course. And the idea behind that is they look for ingredients their entire life and they cook ingredients or whatever. And then they make a list of their favorite foods that you could eat in a full course. So you have an hors d'oeuvre, you have a salad, a soup, there's a meat and a fish, there's a dessert and a drink. I think that's all of them. I think it's all those 7. And basically, one of the whole points of the show is Toriko is making his full course, which he, at the start of the story, has not started. Because he's like, oh, there's so many good foods, I just don't know what to put on my full course. And then you get partway in the show and he starts adding stuff. And the most stuff he adds is, I think, once they get to Gourmet World. But that's, again, not until later in the story. But some of the foods just get ridiculous. And that's kind of one of the exciting parts of the show. It kind of felt like, you know what it kind of felt like? It kind of felt like Food Wars did what Toriko wanted to do with their food reactions. Because Toriko's food reactions, you'd expect them to be big, bombastic, like, because he's getting stronger with each food he eats. At one point, there's literally a food that this group eats, and even people without gourmet cells just get really big and muscular and bulky, and they just bulge out, and it's just like, whoa, whoa. So it kind of felt like there should have been a little more there, and if it ever got adapted again, which I kind of doubt, even though I'd really like it, I would want them to go way over the top with the food reactions, bump up the animation budget, go all out. But, you know, there are some instances where they do some pretty decent reactions. They're very descriptive with their food. I mean, it's the main draw of the show. They have to do it at least semi-well. But then, of course, it's also like Toriko's going on a journey. He's getting stronger and stronger until he can finally go to Gourmet World and not die immediately. So, on one hand, food, and then punch. That's kind of what it is. And some of the concepts for the foods are really interesting. Some of people's powers make no sense, but they're in there anyway because you need people fighting for a shonen battle manga and anime. And you know, honestly, I felt like getting to Gourmet World was the best part of the story, which is the one part that they cut out of the anime because I don't think it was done at the time. And then the ending just wasn't the best in the anime because it changes so many details. I mean, it's mostly the same, and then it just like, in a couple of instances, it just goes off the rails and it's like, nope, this is different. And it's like, well, why are we changing this? I mean, I guess you could at some point make the excuse to continue the anime if you really wanted to at this point, because in some way they're almost at the stage that they were, but now you've kind of decided that Toriko can beat up the main bad guy. Okay, even though he really couldn't at that point because he couldn't even fight Starjun, and Starjun's not even close to the level of the bad guy at the beginning. But honestly, the Gourmet World gets into really interesting stuff. It's got like 8 powerhouses of just creatures in the Gourmet World. You find out a lot about what Gourmet World is and why it exists. And I don't want to give too many spoilers there. But then you get to some of the most ridiculous food that is in the entire show. And I don't want to spoil everything, so I'm going to give 2 examples. There's one that's supposed to take 600,000 years to cook. And yikes. And then there's another one that in order to cook this part of it's the Earth's full course, or Acacia's full course, he was once the greatest gourmet hunter, and he has his full course, and it's like what they're shooting for, and the main course is God, and that's what everybody's after, because it's supposed to be the best food in the world or something. And then in the actual manga, it's a little bit underwhelming how they eat it. But anyway, the last one I want to share is in order to get one of the items on the full course, they need to dance with a monkey so his balls will get bigger and then they will fall off. and and then that's how they get the soup. So it's like like, I mean, come on. It's weird, it's ridiculous. The fights are fun, even if they're weird and they make up rules at random times just so that they can, have the good guys outpower scale the bad guys. I mean, they do get stronger, but in a couple instances, it's like, okay, come on. But it's still fun. The anime's kind of mid, but I really like the manga, even though towards the end it felt like he had, as far as I know, he did have a deadline to finish because I think he was going to get canceled. So like, finish it up. Here's how long you have. So in the end, like one of the dishes of the big, like overall full course that everyone's looking for, they just kind of skip a couple parts of it. They don't really go into how they got it. And that's a little disappointing. And it felt like they were going to go more into it. But then there's a couple things that just aren't explained. And then they just kind of go right into the final fight. And, the villain monologues a lot. But, if they could have expanded that bit out a little more, that would have been nice. But it still wraps up in a nice, pleasing way. So I still did really like it. And I kind of wish there was more. If you do end up liking the anime, they do have a couple tie-ins with One Piece and Dragon Ball. Weirdly enough, I didn't really care to watch those, but whatever. So yeah, as far as manga, it's not like the most standout. But it's by no means bad. It's very good. I really liked it. I had a good time. If you like shonen battle stuff, then watch it or read it read it. Unless you want to hear that announcer at the beginning of every anime episode, because oh my god, that guy, best part. Yeah, if any of this sounded interesting, go ahead and give it a read. Let me know what you think. I really think that Toriko needs more love than it gets. It's super underrated, even with its flaws. Anyway, thank you for listening to me rant. I hope you enjoyed and have a great day.